In a bull market, they'll buy it, and in a bear market, they'll dump it. People are just buying numbers on a screen, and they like those numbers, and they see the number go up, and they buy the ETF, and they have no conviction. So they're not conviction buyers. They're just adding liquidity to this big market. It always ends up blowing up every cycle, and then we'll see another blow up in this cycle. The Trump family got debanked, and apparently that's what orange pilled Eric Trump and other Trump family members, is that they see that when you are able to cut somebody off from their bank, you're controlling them. So that's the bull story right there. Corporate treasuries are bullish. They're buying a lot, but they're doing, obviously, Wall Street financial chicanery that we've been reporting on for 20 years. I think this is all coming apart.
Following the crypto crash earlier this month, buyers like Michael Saylor remain bullish, with investors hoping for a price rebound in the final months of 2025. However, Max Keiser issues a stark warning to all Bitcoin and crypto holders. The current sell-off is just the beginning. He predicts a Bitcoin tsunami that will reshape the crypto landscape forever. Keiser also discusses the inevitable collapse of the fiat monetary system and warns of plans by major players to gain control over Bitcoin and crypto. While firms like BlackRock are entering the space, he argues that even bigger threats are emerging, with entire nations now targeting Bitcoin. Currently, Bitcoin sits just under $111,500, down nearly 1% over the past month. In his latest interview, Keiser stresses why it's more critical than ever for nation-states to adopt Bitcoin and integrate it into the global economy before the existing monetary system collapses. The message is clear. Bitcoin isn't just an investment, it's a strategic hedge against a shifting financial world.
Yeah, I was very interested to hear Tom Lee on CNBC talk about Ethereum, and he's got a price target for Ethereum, and he has no story for that, though. It's like, well, it's going to grab a percentage of Bitcoin's move, right? So there's actually no, it's no pitch at all, and so now, because it's unit price bias, and it's easy for people to say, well, it's at a lot less than a Bitcoin, it's going to catch up to Bitcoin. So it's CNBC playing their usual game of shooting for the lowest common denominator, and it's sad to see, but that's how they make their bones. So have at it, boys. Self-sovereignty means that you don't need any of that infrastructure. You don't need any of those salesmen. You don't need any of that anymore. So that would be a relic, of the past. It's just a change to a much different reality. And you mentioned the ads on TV for Bitcoin are becoming more sophisticated and more targeting the actual use case of Bitcoin in terms of its way to hedge against inflation. And then Coinbase put out this phenomenal ad that got banned in the UK, which shows like a life in the day of a British person. And it was absolute misery, a dystopian nightmare. And it's really surprising to me that they took that particular approach, because after living in the UK, it's amazing what you discover when you live there because of 300 years of central bank larceny.
Chancellor on brink of second bailout for banks.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And there's a good basis for that. So most retail product is IBIT. When you say Larry Fink has 600,000 Bitcoin, no, he doesn't have 600,000 Bitcoin. The people who bought his ETFs, they combined 600,000. And meanwhile, the ETFs are buying a lot of Bitcoin. And I think one of them now has like for like redemption of Bitcoin. So you can actually redeem your ETF for actual
only institutional.
Okay, institutional main chain Bitcoin. So that's like a kind of a step in the right direction. It's actually the only property that can't be confiscated. If you have any other form of property, it can be confiscated. Even if the internet goes down, doesn't mean your Bitcoin disappears. I mean, as long as you've got the network running in some form, everything is still there. The difficulty adjustment just makes the adjustment, and we're still up and running, and it's still behind an impenetrable wall of encryption. It's the only non-confiscatable, unconfiscatable, uncensorable form of property that you can avail yourself to at no cost, right? This never before history has this existed. If you had gold, you need a vault. If you have a house, you need security. You need security to guard your property, but not so with Bitcoin. And this is one of the liberating factors in El Salvador. People realize this. And, they like the fact that they've got money that nobody can touch. It's theirs. It's growing in purchasing power, and it gives them hope. And that's why you have this emergence of the fourth turning in El Salvador, is that there's a groundswell of hope and a lot of it comes from Bitcoin. And of course, the president is doing a fantastic job, but you put those two together and it just adds up to an exit of the fourth turning and a beginning of good times. So then we went into this idea of dilution equals accretion. Because normally when a company sells stocks or bonds, you're diluting the earnings per share, and therefore the multiple would drop down, and so would the price. So he's saying, no, actually dilution, and with our company, it's accretive because we're going to instantly buy Bitcoin, and Bitcoin is going up forever. With markets, stock markets and financial media, there's a perception that they're impenetrable and the language is very opaque. And the class war usually positions the stock market as owned by the ruling class, and the plebs have to deal with the consequences. But having been on Wall Street for many years, as I have been, I know that the markets are easily hacked. So we were trying to flame the fire of this massive short squeeze to take JP Morgan down. And that was also when we began to look more into Bitcoin for its really subversive qualities to exist outside of this very, very corrupt banking system. And so we dovetailed into Bitcoin from that point. And as Stacy has said, the reaction was quite negative because at that time, the gold bugs and the libertarians that were primary audience really hated the idea of Bitcoin. So it took about 5 or 6 years to get some traction in that camp. And then Bitcoin came around, and it's just another hack really to subvert the worst tendencies of markets and concentration of markets to decentralize and to democratize wealth. And that's what Bitcoin represents. And so that's always been an interesting story.
Embracing unwavering enthusiasm for the crypto space, Keiser confidently predicts that the next major collapse is on the horizon, with BlackRock and other crypto giants preparing for impact. Despite this, he reassures investors that a long-anticipated surge is coming, and Bitcoin's price is still expected to rise exponentially in the second half of 2025.
And that's been great, gaining every year. Now we're at another huge milestone with what's happening in Bitcoin around the world. But the idea of self-hodling for these retail buyers and ETFs never crosses their mind.
I think it's important also to note that BlackRock is a good one to look at. Is they have the Bitcoin ETF and the Ethereum ETF, and then you could see that the story of Bitcoin is easy. It's a powerful story. There's no story for Ethereum. What is it? Right. Why? Like, there's no story for any of the other currencies, the coins out there. BlackRock actually just recently said they're not going to offer a Solana or one of the other coins. I don't know. But they're not going to be, or XRP. They're not going to be offering ETFs for any of those. They're going to they're sticking with the Bitcoin one, especially.
And so Bitcoin is really the hero, and the bankers are the villains. And so that's a story, and that story is much more interesting than, let's say, James Cramer over at CNBC, who simply says, buy this stock, and he, hits a tambourine or something and does something crazy. But there's no real story with James Cramer. It's just buy this, sell that. There's nothing really interesting with what he said. So the truth about markets was essentially, when you read these financial headlines and these financial publications, what's really going on, kind of like how do brokers talk about markets? It's like an insider view of how the people who sell this stuff every day on Wall Street or the City of London, how do they approach it? How do they talk to each other? So we kind of brought that to the fore.
But you could see the volume there. You could see how the work of removing, how ETFs removed the unit bias that you mentioned, because there was a unit bias before. And you saw that back in 2020, 2021, when the last time Bitcoin went up, is the altcoins. People were like, $60,000 Bitcoin, I can't afford 60,000, but I could afford $3,000 Ethereum, right? So they went into the altcoins, and the ones even smaller, the ones $10 or $20, I could afford that. So you saw that in the last round, but the ETFs just destroy the unit bias, because you just know it's like $50, whatever, like it's a $50 a unit there. And without that unit bias, so off the exchanges, like it used to be the exchanges, every single cycle before now was on the exchanges where the whole unit cost price existed. But on Wall Street, where there's no unit price like that, Bitcoin just trounces the other coins in terms of the ETFs. So that's because it's the only one that has a story that makes sense. That is money. That is digital gold. That is a digital treasury. Basically, it's money. It's sound money. It's a layer one money. However you want to put it. It's got a story that is easy for people to understand. Yeah. And how are they going to pitch this to retail, right? And all of the Bitcoin ETF commercials were powerful and easy and beautiful, some of them, right? Even Coinbase, right? Like, so they keep on putting out these amazing Bitcoin commercials. They never do a commercial about XRP or any of the other tokens that they actually push if you sign up for them. Like, it's like pushing the other tokens, because the exchanges make money on that, right? But the story, the narrative is only in Bitcoin. So that's the only story that matters. This is in danger, I would think, of triggering that sort of collapse of this whole fiat system, not just the dollar, but the dollar is the fiat system, right? That all the other currencies are just kind of like the altcoins of that space, of the fiat space. So I don't know. It's positive and negative. It's complicated.
The Bank of Japan, long a central player in global currency markets, is reportedly on the brink of default, a move that could trigger a global economic downturn. Max Keiser predicts a looming crisis driven by collapsing fiat systems, runaway inflation, and bank failures. He suggests the world may be moving toward a Bitcoin standard as a response to the impending turmoil. According to Keiser, the promises of the Federal Reserve and central banks have proven hollow, leading to excessive money printing and a wave of poor investments. With the recent surge in inflation, he warns that the status quo is unlikely to return, and the U.S. faces an escalating debt crisis. Keiser outlines two stark possibilities: hyperinflation or a deflationary depression, both of which would erode the overall quality of life. He emphasizes the lack of viable solutions, signaling that the crisis could be even more severe than anticipated. Interestingly, he notes that political figures are beginning to discuss Bitcoin as part of a potential response, indicating a shift toward a Bitcoin-centric financial framework. What do you think of Max Keiser's latest interview? How do you feel about his Bitcoin predictions and the idea of a world moving toward a crypto-based financial system? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. For more Daily Dose Crypto News, check out these two awesome videos on your screen. Click now and we will see you on the next video.